All right, Josh and Ben are here to kick off what we might not have named yet, but I think we're going to call the Bad at Magic podcast. I picked that name because I think that it is kind of funny sounding and doesn't necessarily tie us down to one particular kind of content.
Just magical content, apparently.
Yeah, anything magic. Whatever it is in your life you like that you think is magical. I'm Ben Rich. We are currently coming to you from a hotel room in Las Vegas, Nevada. Yes, we've just played Magic for 2 full days straight and somehow haven't gotten our fill of it, and we're probably going to go back for more later. But we're taking a break out from the Grand Prix at the Magic Fest to record an inaugural podcast.
Yes, I am Josh. I have been Ben's friend for decades. I'm just going to go with decades. I am bad at magic, so this podcast is probably really appropriate. And for me, this is so Ben plays magic still, and he's good at it, and he's very competitive. I introduced it to him years and years ago, but I don't play it anymore. And so these weekends for me, it's less a trip with the guys to go do a fun thing, and it's more a complete bender. Like, I'm trying to get all the nerd out of my system as much as possible. So when I go back to my family, then I can suppress the urges for longer. It's almost like a cleanse this weekend.
Nice. So I think that's a great transition to what I want to talk about, why we're even doing this podcast at all, and who it is we're talking to. Like, who's the person in the third chair listening to us but not able to respond. So I don't want anyone that doesn't play Magic or doesn't understand Magic that's listening to us right now feel excluded from this discussion, because I by no means intend to constrain what we're talking about just to Magic the Gathering. But I'll tell you why we're starting with Magic the Gathering. So a year ago, I was on a military business trip to Virginia, and Josh contacted me and said, hey, I got some friends that are getting together in Dallas, Texas, and we're going to have a weekend bender. I guess that was your annual bender last year.
Yes, it was.
Of playing games like all weekend, like total crazy nerd games where it has like you get out a board game that has 1 million pieces and an instruction book that looks like the Bible, and everyone's excited. And he invited me to come, and I was out of town, so it wasn't going to be a burden on my family. I didn't have any extra responsibilities. I didn't have anything going on that weekend. I'm like, sure. So I bought a plane ticket to Dallas, and I flew down there, and we had a great weekend playing games together. Maybe we'll talk about that weekend some other time. The story I want to tell, though, is what happened at the airport afterwards.
Yeah, it was a really strange event at the airport afterwards. It was because before you came to the trip, you were at another Magic Fest. I don't know if it was called Magic, but you were at another Magic Gathering tournament.
Grand Prix New Jersey.
Your Grand Prix New Jersey. This is
right.
A very high competitive, high stakes tournament for Magic the Gathering, and Ben did very, very well. We don't have to get into the specifics of how well he did, but he did exceedingly well, to the point where it almost became a job.
Right. I got a pro point, and I was,
the opportunity to play in the big leagues, getting called up. But so we were at the airport in Dallas, waiting for our planes to leave, and we had a long conversation because...
Right. We'd had the whole weekend playing games together, and I hadn't yet had a chance to unpack all that, and I wanted to. Yeah. And I was glad that we had some time before our flights took off, that I was able to just kind of unload on you what that meant to me, how well I'd done in that Grand Prix New Jersey.
Yeah, and we did talk about that, but then the conversation kind of evolved a little bit into the specifics, and not about the game, but about how you played the game, and decisions you make, and how you made the decisions, and what your thought processes were, how you were analyzing the game state and your opponent and what was happening. And it became a high level discussion less about that game or that tournament, and more about just how your brain attacks these problems in the first place.
Sure, and if I remember correctly, I was also talking a bit about what it meant to me as a person. Why do I play games? Why is it so important to me that I go to tournaments like that, and why was it so meaningful to me that I performed well? Mm-hmm. And then, so you and I were sitting, I don't know, outside of a Chick-fil-A or something like that. We'd ordered some food. And
it was definitely some kind of a Mexican place, because I was eating guacamole.
Okay, so if you want to imagine this, we're sitting in the Dallas airport. We've gone through security. We both have flights within a couple of hours. We've gotten some food, and we're sitting an open-air, open-seating cafe type area, and I am explaining to Josh what he's just told me, what he just described about how I went to Grand Prix New Jersey a couple of weeks before and did really well in it. Now, like you said, I've been playing Magic for a decade or so, and so this was kind of a watershed for me, because it was maybe my 10th or 11th Grand Prix that I'd gone to, which is just an open tournament where anyone can enter but you could end up beating all the pros, qualifying for the pro tour, and so anyone that participates in those kinds of tournaments has this dream of glory.
It's in your mind somewhere.
Yeah, even if I'm not a pro, today I could be. Today I could beat all comers and be the one left standing with $8,000 in my pocket and a trophy in my hand.
And that's a topic in of itself, the concept of the opportunity of, the person rising from the masses, and because that's the story that we love to tell ourselves.
It is.
Across all of society, that everybody's kind of generic and boring, but you are special.
Right.
You're the one.
So we're sitting in this open air cafeteria in the Dallas airport, and I'm unpacking all this. It's emotionally burdensome to me, not in a heavy kind of way, but like in a weighty kind of way. Mm-hmm. I wanted to share it with you because I knew you could understand it and you would respect it. But I didn't in my wildest mind think anyone else would understand it or respect what I was trying to say. I imagine going home telling my wife and being like, honey, I went... I'm 11-4 in the Grand Prix, and she'd just go, "Good, honey," and not care.
That's actually more care than I would get from my wife. I'd be like, so I went to the tournament. She would stop me and be like, "I don't care." So, but like you were talking about, what made this interesting and what spawned this whole idea is that when we got up to leave.
Okay, so I want to tell about that moment.
Okay.
Because I was kind of in the zone because it was, like I said, it was emotional for me that we were having this discussion. Mm-hmm. It felt good. I liked being able to tell you about how excited I was and all the importance it had to me, and I thought that it was just a geeky, nerdy, unrelatable conversation. And we finished eating our food. It was about time for our flights. We kind of ended our discussion like we do, like we're never done talking, but we'll stop for now and we'll continue later. And I stood up to go, and I turned, and just to the left of me, at one table over, was this woman, and I can only describe her as looking like a cast member from Sex and the City. Like, she was dressed to the nines, hair, makeup, looked like fashionista woman.
She looked like how you would expect somebody would look traveling in the 1940s or 50s. Because like the air travel was a big deal, and it was nice. You got dressed up. Is that a thing?
Yeah,
I thought that was a thing.
Right.
Her husband.
She was a vestige of a bygone era.
There you go. And her husband was there, and he was also wearing like a nice suit.
I don't remember that.
You don't remember that?
No, I just remember the woman.
There was another person there. Huh. So you were laser focused that day.
So we stood up to go, and I turned, and she was sitting one table over. I want to describe it as she had her chin resting in her hands, and she was staring directly at us. like a child listening to their mother tell them their favorite story. Is that not the impression she gave?
Okay, so I will agree that's the impression she gave. In reality, I would describe it as we were leaving, and then she, like, as we were getting up, she kind of just stopped us for a second. It's like, "Oh, hey boys, I just wanted to let you know before you go.
I've been eavesdropping."
Yeah, I've been eavesdropping this whole time. I have absolutely no interest in anything of what you're discussing or the games or whatever, but I found the conversation just incredibly fascinating about how you were so into it and breaking it down, and just like, it was just the idea that I think she appreciated that, or didn't appreciate before and did afterwards, that something so simple looking from the outside could have such complexity and depth and emotional content on your side.
Yeah. And to me, that was an epiphany. The epiphany was that here is someone that looks like she's from another planet compared to me. And yet, she was sitting there for, I don't know, it couldn't have been less than a half hour.
It was about that. It was about half an hour.
Listening to our conversation and engrossed by it.
And it was interesting because, like she even said, she had no idea what we were really talking about. So she had almost no context. But even absent, separated from the context, apparently what we were discussing was very interesting. Now, one thing I want to point out is we have conversations like this all the time. And like you mentioned, we're never really done talking. We just kind of stop for what can be sometimes years. And I will point out for anybody that's listening and never met us before, but it's a weird thing. I only have this relationship with Ben where like we will be speaking to the moment that one of us has to like get on a plane or be physically separated. And then the next time we see each other, there's maybe 5 seconds like, "Oh, hey man, how's it going?" And we high five, and then immediately launch into some kind of a deep rhetorical discussion of something.
Pick up where we left off.
Basically, yeah.
In a sense.
And of course, we're the stars of our own lives, so you and I both think that these conversations are super fascinating.
Good. I want this to be a theme of our podcast going forward. Josh believes that everyone is the star of their own life.
Yes, and if you think that, yes, there's quantifiable evidence. If you just think about a person, like, why would a person choose to do that? Because they're the star of their own life. Why would this guy cut me off in traffic? He knows he's not supposed to cut me off in traffic. Well, obviously, he's the star of his own life. Whatever's happening in his life is so super important that, and you're nobody to him. You're that guy in the car behind you. Like, you don't think about them.
So I've picked up the habit. Now, you, from your time at cleaning pools, worked in a profession where you had a lot of time where you were doing something physical, but your mind was free if you just put something in your ears to listen to whatever you wanted to.
Yes, it did.
And you found yourself listening sometimes to audiobooks and sometimes to podcasts like what we're doing now, where people were just talking, and it helped to engage your mind in ideas and keep you probably sane while you're doing that monotonous physical task.
Yes.
So I started doing it. You keyed me into the Hello Internet podcast with CGP Grey and Brady Haran, and I started listening to it. And I found it fascinating and engrossing, not because I was a YouTuber, which is what they talk about a lot of the time, or because I was a online media producer, or because I was a teacher, or whatever those guys are, but because they talked about ideas that, just like you said about Sex and the City lady in the airport, that regardless of the context of what was being said, the ideas are relatable and engageable and something that you can process and find and get useful. So it wasn't until that moment that she stopped us, and she really broke the stranger barrier there. She could have just let us walk away, but she didn't. She felt compelled to reach out. I think she may have touched one of us and be like, hey, I want to tell you guys, I was eavesdropping on that whole thing, and I really found it interesting. And it wasn't until that moment that I thought that maybe I had something to say too, like listening to the Hello Internet podcast. Maybe I have something to say that someone else might be able to put on while they're sweeping the kitchen or mowing the lawn and listen to and find interesting.
Maybe these conversations that we have, that we find so fascinating, maybe other people find them fascinating too. All right, so I'm on the other side of the spectrum. I'm on the side of, I really enjoy our conversations. Maybe other people will find them entertaining, but I don't expect them to. And that's fine, because these conversations aren't for them. Well, except for this one, I guess is for them, specifically. So, Ben is much more emotionally vested in this project than I am, which is fine, but Ben is my friend, and so I will be emotionally vested in him, not necessarily the project. If this turns into a thing and we need to record and we need to get equipment and do it more often, I am absolutely down. No problem, let's go forward. I just have much lower expectations, but I guess that's just my general outlook on life anyway.
So probably in the future we'll record them remotely, obviously, on a periodic basis, yet to be determined. But also maybe when we get together at times like this. So here we are staring out on the mountains in Nevada and the Strip on one side, out our hotel window on the 11th floor of the Westgate, Las Vegas. There's the convention center where we've been playing Magic all day, every day for 2 days. And while we were over there playing Magic, we had something happen that I thought would be a fascinating idea to discuss. So if you don't mind, we'll transition to that.
Okay, first, right off the bat. Okay, you want me to tell a story?
Yeah.
Okay. So, you don't need to know anything about the game, but there's stuff that you bring. So it's just a card game, so there's the cards, but then there's all the accoutrement.
Paraphernalia.
The paraphernalia, yes, the merchandise and the things. So everybody's wearing like t-shirts, and there's fancy boxes you can get to hold everything, and then most people that are anywhere serious about it have a playmat. Because they're just folding card tables that we're playing on, and these cards can be very expensive.
It's almost like golf. You can go bare Spartan, which is the bare minimum, or you can deck everything out.
Oh, that's like, name any hobby. You can geek out and spend as much money on it as you want. It doesn't matter what it is. But in this case, like, these tables are pretty dirty. Some of these cards are very expensive, so most people have what's called a playmat, and it's like a mouse pad, and it's, I don't know, maybe the size of a breadboard, 2 feet by 1.5 feet or something, and it just makes a nice clean surface. But
it also gives a bit of sponginess because you're picking up cards off a hard table, and it allows you to pick cards up.
Yeah, I never thought of that, but you're right. That does make it a lot easier. Anyway, it's a nice thing to have, and if you've spent any time or any investment playing the game, you most likely own a playmat.
if you only wanted it purely for function of having a smooth surface that made it easy to pick cards up, it would just be plain. Probably gray because you put your hands all over it, and over time it would just turn gray. So if you're going for pure functionality, it would just be like, it's like a mouse pad, a big mouse pad that's gray, and that would be the bare minimum.
And there are people down there that have that. There are people down there that just have like a grain or a green one, or I've seen a couple white ones which do get really dirty. But most people buy playmats that have some kind of artwork on it, and it's the whole spectrum. There's people with custom ones, they got hand painted or drawn by some artist, and there's other ones that are mass produced. We got a playmat for entering in the tournament as one of the registration gifts, or the door prizes or whatever.
Right.
Anyway, we were sitting down to play a game, and then a couple of people over from me, there was a young lady that laid out her playmat, and I was immediately captivated by it. And I've never been captivated by a playmat before in my whole life. I have 3 or 4 at home, and they're pretty, and there's ones that I like better than the others, but they're a functional surface. They are a thing that I use for an end state. Never a thing in of itself that I wanted to own.
You could have a bit more emotional investment in it, like maybe because you got it at a particular tournament, it's tied to that event and you remember that event.
You, the third party general, yes.
Right.
Now,
or if you had someone do custom art for you, it could be because of your relationship with that person or the art you chose to put on it. But in this situation, it was none of those things.
It was none of those things. No, it was what drew me to this one. I don't know why. It was just gorgeous artwork. And usually, like, I like art. I'll look at it and I'll appreciate art. But I don't go out and like pursue art. I don't want to go buy art. I don't have anything fancy artwork in my house or decor or whatever. But this one something about it just grabbed me. Like just reached into my brain and yanked my attention straight to it. And I had that, like, where did you get that? It's like, oh, they're selling them like right over there. And like as soon as the game was over, like I got up and like Ben came and found me. And I was like, hey, I've got to go look at this thing. This playmat was amazing, and I want to go see if they still have it.
So I came in the middle of this, and I've seen you get like this before, but I had not yet recognized what was happening. That you had now become fixated on getting this thing. So I thought I was going to be able to talk you out of it. Because I knew your wife probably didn't want you to buy extra stuff and come home with extra things and stuff like that. So I thought, oh, I'll just talk him out of it. He was just attracted by some twinkly thing, squirrel, and be like, no, just...
And I am prone to do that, where I see something that's fancy or whatever, and I want to go touch it, I want to pick it up, and I want to look at it. Not, maybe not necessarily to go buy it, but this was another level. Like it was a weird situation for me, because once we found the booth that had it, I walked up to it, and they had it laid out on a table next to some other ones, and I can't even describe, like, I could not physically bring myself to walk away from the booth without that playmat.
I was kind of astonished by your reaction.
You were like, you did it like 3 or 4 times. Like, okay, that's nice. Come on, let's go. And then like you would start walking off, and I just wouldn't move.
So obviously that means that objectively it wasn't fantastic. This wasn't the best playmat in the history of playmats.
Yeah.
It was just a nice playmat.
Yeah, it wasn't spun gold that like every person would have to have this thing.
Right.
Yeah.
But to you, it connected. And that's the underlying idea I want to get at here. So finish talking about what happened with that one, and then we'll get at that idea.
Well, what happened was I started processing in my brain like reasons to, like, I was just building the pros and cons list straight down the side. And then I realized at some point there is that higher level function that's analyzing what my brain is doing, and it clicked in, and I immediately thought, like, what am I doing? I've been standing here for like 5 straight minutes doing nothing because I want this playmat, and I'm trying to talk myself into...
You couldn't move forward in your life.
I was at a complete standstill. My brain was...
You were like a rat in a maze and you come to a dead end.
No, worse. Like, I was recognizing, it was the warning bubble that popped up in my head. Like, more and more of my brain cycles are being taken up by the decision whether or not to get this playmat.
What would happen if I'd somehow talked you into not getting it and we'd walked away? Would you have been able to stop thinking about it?
No, I would have gone back and bought it.
What if someone had bought the last one while you were away and you'd gone back and it wasn't there? Then what would you have done?
That is the reason I bought it while I was standing there.
Okay.
So dear listener, the punchline, if you have not figured out by now, is the only way I was going to escape this trap that Ben was talking about, this maze, was I bought the playmat. I was bit the bullet, like, you know what?
I'm not going to be able to stop thinking about this.
I'm not going to be able to stop thinking about this, and if I come back after the next round and they are gone, I will be just crushed and disappointed. I know that. And that's what threw the scales in the favor of, you know what, it's worth the $20 just to get this out of my brain. And you know what? I have played on that mat the rest of the time, and I every time I lay it out, I just love it. I just want to rub my hands on it, and it's beautiful, and I love it.
Okay, so after that, you brought it over and you laid it out on the table and you started talking to me about it, and I realized there was this underlying cognitive thing happened that I thought was interesting that we could talk about. And that is this idea of being infatuated with something to the point where it captures your attention.
Okay.
So, dear listener, maybe you're thinking of one yourself. Maybe it's a person, maybe it's a kind of food, maybe it's a place that you went, maybe it's an object you saw. So I asked Josh a question. Can you think of other things in your life that when you've seen it has captured you with this kind of infatuation where you felt like you just couldn't move on until you had the thing?
And what's weird is I've been thinking about it since you asked me that question, and I can't really come up with anything that was that level. Like, I've always been able to, there's things that you like and like, this is really cool, I really want this, and then you walk away from it. Here's a good example. My family and I took a trip to Legoland like a month ago, and they had a Lego set that is just it's cool. It's super awesome, and I really like it. But it's one of those big ones. It's like $170 or something, thousands of pieces, and I've had those, and I've purchased.
What
those.
was it? It was like the Millennium Falcon.
No, I have the Millennium Falcon.
All right, me too.
All right. All right. So right now, I'm gonna draw the line. If you don't own a Millennium Falcon Lego set, you're probably not going to enjoy the rest of the podcast.
I think that's a requirement.
Just go ahead and cut out now. No, it was from the second Lego movie. Rex Dangervest. He had that spaceship. It's the giant blue spaceship.
Oh, it looks like a fist.
It's shaped like a
Yes,
fist.
a big blue fist.
Yes, and when that, we saw the movie in the theaters, and I came home and I googled it. Oh, that's got to be a Lego set. And at the time, it wasn't. But since then, they have made it a Lego set, and it's one of the big ones. And I've seen it in the stores a couple of times, and every time I see it, I'm like, this is awesome, and I want this, but it serves no purpose in my life. So maybe for like a birthday or Christmas, I can justify the expense.
Give it to your son and pretend it's for him.
No, I want to make a clear distinction, because no, my son gets Lego sets, and then I get Lego sets, and they're different, and they're treated differently.
Oh. My wife and I still do that. We still buy Lego sets for the kids and pretend it's for them. And then we start putting them together like, hey, what are you doing?
No, we don't pretend. We say, this one's for Daddy, this one's for Carter, this one's for Jane.
All right.
But there was...
I like that difference in our families.
The Millennium Falcon, this is what happened. Like, I got the Millennium Falcon for my birthday gift, and I put it together, and it was amazing. It was huge. And I set it on a shelf, and my son, who at the time was like 5, like, can I play with it? I was like, no, sorry, this is for Daddy. This is not for playing, this is for looking at, because it's amazing.
Dude, you sounded like Will Ferrell's character from the first Lego movie.
This is a great transition, because then we went and saw the first Lego movie. Yes, we did.
And you're like, I'm Lord Business.
And like, if you haven't seen the movie, listener, well, you're just not going to enjoy the next part. But no, we came home, and then a couple of days later, my son said, hey, Daddy, can I play with the Millennium Falcon? And I got down on a knee and teared up a bit. I'm like, son, you can play with whatever you want. And I handed it to him, and I felt like I was having this great father-son moment.
That is awesome.
No, but this is the thing. I'm having this great moment.
Uh-huh.
He took it, turned around, and I swear to you, Ben, it was not 10 minutes later before that thing was in its individual pieces again.
What?
Just completely shredded, gone forever.
Well, okay, but hence Lego Movie 2, where everything's a barren wasteland because you let the kids play with it.
Exactly.
The dad just had to give up on it.
No, so
were you ready to do that?
This is why we have the division now, right? So there's not family Lego sets. There is, you have your Legos, we have our Legos, and we know what you're going to do to them if you play with them. So now, since then, my wife has gotten a Lego Star Destroyer, the full-size one. It's like 4 feet wide. It's amazing and huge. We put it together, and it sits on our entertainment center underneath our TV, and the kids are not allowed to touch it.
Okay, so you had to find a middle point after you had your teary-eyed moment on one knee.
Well, because I had the teary-eyed moment thinking I'm doing the right thing, and then it got shredded and put to pieces, and he's never going to put it back together.
Right.
And so, yeah, the one moment was important for me, but it wasn't to him. So, what's the point?
Yeah, what did they call the barren wasteland in the second Lego movie?
Apocalypsburg or something.
Yeah, no one wants a Apocalypsburg in their living room.
They have such really hard to describe, hard to pronounce names.
So we went off on a tangent there, but it was a good one, and that was you were infatuated with the Blue Fist spaceship.
Yes, from
Legoland.
But that's like a tier or two down from what happened today.
Okay.
With the Playmat, because I have seen it 3 or 4 times now in person, and every time I see it, I stand by it for a second. I'm like, no, I just can't do it, and then I walk away and I continue to live my life. The Playmat I was unable to physically move away. That has never happened before.
So I'm going to ask you a question about the Playmat. I want you to think about it, not answer right away. I'll tell you my story, and then see if you can answer the question.
Okay.
Here's a question. Think about stuff that's happened in your life or things that are important to you that might be elements of what made that infatuation so irresistible. Because I figured this out about something that happened in my life, so I'll tell you a story.
Okay.
So, I'm 17 years old. I just transitioned from a year and a half of working fast food to working retail, moving up in the world.
Moving on up.
My family was very poor at the time. I'm the oldest of 6 kids. My dad was making $800 a month. $800 a month to support 6 kids. The only way we even had a place to live is it included a house. It was this dumpy old farmhouse in northern Illinois.
Yeah, but you're really old. So, I mean, $800 a month could have bought, like a house back then.
All right, I'll let that one go. So, I just transitioned from a couple years working at Taco Bell to working at Sears. I had to wear a suit and tie to work. I worked in the computer section. People would come in, and I would try to sell them a computer, and they would... I remember one old lady came in and wanted just to buy the monitor, but she didn't want to buy the boxy thing on the side because that had a bigger price tag on it. She didn't understand that you need the boxy thing on the side to make the monitor make pictures.
That's the original, scam right there. Is, you can't just buy this. You've got to buy the other one, too.
You need the CPU as well as the monitor.
Oh, you bought the trailer, but your car can't pull the trailer, so you need to get a truck.
So the Sears I worked at was attached to a mall, and my paycheck of working in sales was partially salary or hourly and partially based on commission. So if I sold more, I got more. Every now and then, my eyes would just start to swim with the fact that I'm pulling in almost as much money as my dad is working in a retail job.
Oof.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was really poor, and I found this out. Okay, I'm getting too much into the backstory. Let me talk about the infatuation piece, and then I'll talk about the backstory. So, on one of my breaks for my retail job, in the Sears, I would go for a walk in the mall. Walk down to the food court, get something to eat, and go back on my lunch or whatever. So, I'm walking past Foot Locker, and I glance in the window and see the most glorious pair of shoes I'd ever seen. It was like the proverbial, light coming from behind it with a choir of angels singing, "Oh!" And I'm wearing a suit and tie and Oxfords, and I stop in my tracks and go into Foot Locker, just like you described with this Playmat, to see this pair of shoes, the Nike Air Max 95, and it was 1995, and they were brand new.
I can tell you were really serious about these shoes because you remember the make and model of shoes from 1995.
Since that time, I have owned 14 pairs of those shoes.
Wow.
I'm not wearing them now.
I immediately... All right. For those of you who are not physically present with us, as soon as he said that I own 14 pairs of these shoes since then, I immediately looked at Ben's shoes.
I'm not wearing them now, but I own 3 pairs at home, and I tried really hard not to bring any of them on this trip. And I succeeded. So, I saw these shoes, I went to the store, I had the sales associate give me a pair and try them on, and I tried them on, and they felt glorious, and they looked beautiful. If you've never seen these shoes, Google Nike Air Max 95 and look at them. Google the neon color, because there was only one colorway when they first came out. They were black and white and gray and neon green, and they had these giant air pockets under the heel and under the forefoot, which maybe is commonplace nowadays, but at the time it was the first time that it had ever been done. These looked like these were Millenium Falcon shoes. They were like rocket ships on your feet. They were the coolest thing I'd ever seen. So imagine me, I'm wearing my suit and tie and these Nike Air Max 95s, and I'm walking around the store, and I think I almost walked out the door, and so the guy was like, sir, you have to pay for those. I did not have the money. They cost $130, I think. I can't remember for sure. Which again might not sound like much in 2018, but in 1995 they were the most expensive shoe in the store. Mm-hmm. By a long shot.
Well, it's also a Foot Locker, so...
And I didn't have that much money.
Okay.
And I couldn't bear taking them off and leaving, but I didn't have that much money. I didn't have a credit card, I didn't have that much money in my bank account, I wasn't going to have that much money for a while. And I felt the wall that you're talking about, this infatuation barrier, like, oh no, I want this thing, I need this thing, I must have this thing, I cannot move on in my life until I have this thing. And at the time, back in 1995, we don't do this anymore, I don't think, anywhere but Kmart. There was a layaway policy.
Of course there was.
So, I talked to the sales associate, I think I put, $30 down. had to skip my lunch that day and put these Nike Air Max 95s on layaway. I don't remember how long it took me. A month and a half later, longest month and a half of my life, and I got these glorious, beautiful shoes, and I loved them. Like no one has ever loved shoes before. And like I said, since that time I've owned 14 pairs of all different colorways, and they have endured the test of time. You can still buy brand new Nike Air Max 95s. They were such a timeless, beautiful design that they still make them today exactly as they did back then.
Okay, I'm glad you wrapped up, because I was going to interrupt you to make sure that you were going off on a tangent. This is something that, if this podcast takes off, people will understand about us, is that we go off on a lot of tangents. We have conversations, and then the tangents turn into the conversation, and then they have tangents from that, and we spiral out of control quickly.
I think we usually remember what it was that got us started, and we can go back.
Now, this is what I was going to bring up next. You usually remember, excuse me, I'm so hoarse. You usually remember what we started off on and how we got down this weird path. I have long since given up, and I just enjoy the traipse through the thicket that is these weird conversations that we have. You're the one that's holding the map. They're like, no, wait, we took this left turn and this left turn, so we got to go back to this place. And I'm just like, whatever, man, I'm along for the ride.
Sometimes you're the one that says, wait a minute, I need to land my plane.
I do say that sometimes, because you're trying to pull us off on another tangent, and there's a point that I've got to get across. So when it's my turn to talk, Ben, we're not going to go off on tangents. We're going to talk about what I want to talk about. So to go back to what we were talking about previously, the Nike Air Max 1995 edition, neon green, glorious shoe. You asked me, what do you think was the thing that sucked me into this playmat? I'm going to counter ask you that question first.
Okay. What sucked me into the Nike Air Max 95?
Yes.
Okay, I'll tell you. Because I didn't know for the longest time. I was fascinated with these shoes. And as I got older and got more money, it became progressively easier for me to spend $130 on a pair of shoes. But
harder to justify.
and
easier to do and harder to justify.
And yet I own 3 pair.
Right.
Of shoes that are functionally identical. I have one pair that's gray, one pair that's blue and white, and another pair that's a different kind of blue and white.
Listen, we have formal blue and white, and we have slightly informal blue and white. This is a very important distinction.
You nailed it, actually. That's exactly it. Okay, a year ago, my parents were visiting my sister in northern Illinois, and we were sitting outside around a picnic table, and I was starting to have this realization that maybe you've had with your parents, that as you grow up in life and you start to have your own problems and responsibilities, and you have kids and you raise them, you'll have this moment where you have an epiphany and you're like, oh my gosh, this must have been what this was like for my parents at this time.
I had that epiphany, yes.
And then you rewind in time to when you were the kid in that situation, and you realize what your parents were thinking when the roles were reversed. So I realized that at that time in my life, when my dad had just been released from the Air Force without a job, went unemployed for a year, was barely getting by to support his family, I went through a time in my life where I never had good shoes. Never. And my mom always used to tell me that when you spend more on shoes, all you're paying for is the brand. She used to insist on it. And I remember this one time when I was 12 years old, just as we were leaving Oklahoma to move to Alaska in the Air Force. She took me to a farm in Fleet. It's like this store where they sell saddles and horse tack, but they also happen to sell like Levi's made out of inch-thick denim so that you can herd cattle. And they had pseudo-athletic shoes. And I needed some shoes really bad because that was a time in my life where I was growing real fast. And I told my mom, and she relented and spent, I think, $13.94 on a pair of pseudo-athletic shoes. They were black, and they were made out of hard plastic. And they were horrid. The only redeeming quality these shoes had is when I got to Alaska and everything was packed snow, they were like ice skates. And I could run and slide anywhere I wanted. But otherwise, they were worthless. They left marks on the gym floor. They only had traction. They never had traction when you wanted them to, and only had traction when you didn't want them to. Was pretty much their defining characteristic. They were uncomfortable and they were hateful, and I hated them.
They were hateful shoes.
And my mom insisted they were as good as regular shoes. So, 20 years later, we're sitting at this table at my sister's house, and I brought that up with my mom, and she confesses to me that she knew they weren't as good as regular shoes, but she was under sworn secrecy from my father to never admit that we couldn't have things other people could have because we didn't have enough money.
And because that's something that you shelter your kids from at all costs.
And so I realized I've got this deeply ingrained complex about shoes. Because I wanted nice shoes, and I could never have nice shoes.
Those shoes were so hateful that they scarred your mind. Your psyche was burned by these shoes.
So when I finally had a job of my own and a pair of shoes that I was infatuated with, like your first love, your first crush, these were my first shoe crush that I was able to have. Maybe there were shoes I saw before that I thought were beautiful and glamorous that I wanted, but these were the shoes that were mine. These were my first kiss. And it's imprinted on me like a goose that comes out of its egg and the first thing they see is a human. You know, these are forevermore will be my shoes. The Nike Air Max 95. And so that is the source. That was the childhood trauma that led to my infatuation with those shoes.
I have a similar story, but with none of the emotional complexity.
Okay. Are you talking about the Playmat now?
Nope.
Because
all
right. Go ahead on your tangent.
All right. This is tangent number 1. You ready? All right. My first job in high school, I worked at a pool store that my dad owned. I was getting paid cash under the table.
So you didn't have to pay taxes.
Yeah, which at the time, like, I'm a tax accountant now. So, like, looking back, like, again, shame on you, teenager.
Again,
Josh,
looking back on grown-up things now that you're doing it from the other side.
Exactly. I know exactly why they were paying me cash under the table. It was cheaper for them. And I thought it was awesome because I just had cash. Anyway, first week's pay, $80. And I was
most money you'd ever seen in your life.
I was 16 years old and I was stoked. This is all for me? Like, I get all of this? I can do whatever I want with $80? Like, before that, you know, your parents are nice. Like, my parents were...
Right.
Like,
give you $5.
You know, yeah, like, if I needed gas for my car, 10 or 15 bucks at the time, whatever. But this, like, I took that $80 and, like, on my drive home, I stopped at Best Buy. Because consumer electronics, that's where you got them, right? And I'm walking around, I'm like, I have $80, and I knew exactly what I was going to get. And it was not what you would think a teenage boy would get. I went straight to the home appliances, and I bought a blender. With the entire $80.
What?
Yeah.
A blender?
A blender.
Do you remember what brand it was?
Yeah, I do. It was.
Do you still have it?
It was the chrome-plated Osterizer blender, and I don't still have it.
Oh,
that's another story. My parents kept it and burned it out at some point. But, all right, so at the time, my parents had just...
You went to Best Buy to buy a blender?
I went to Best Buy to buy a blender.
What the hell?
Wait, where else are you going to get a quality blender? Anyway, I drank milkshakes after dinner, like every other night. And my parents at the time had like some $15 Walmart blender. The one, it's a plastic housing and it's got like 7 buttons.
Yeah.
Like, oh, this is the one that'll shred anything. And that blender was a piece of garbage, and it drove me nuts. And it like would just jam up, and like it wouldn't mix the ice cream, and I hated it. The same way you hated these shoes. It was just a mounting progressive inconvenience. And so I went.
A blender has to be good. It has one job.
Exactly. Your job is to mix this, and it didn't, and it wouldn't, and it couldn't, and I hated it.
Okay.
So I spent $80, and I bought a blender, and I threw that blender my parents had bought, and I threw it in the trash, and I replaced it with this stainless steel, like half horsepower, like beast that it didn't even have buttons. It had a switch. It had on and off, and that was it.
What? Awesome.
And anything that you put in there, it just shredded and liquefied. It was great.
Why were you so concerned with having a good blender? Like, were you like building muscles for high school sports or something?
Well, I was just. Kind of. I don't know. I just drank milkshakes all the time.
Okay.
Because I liked them and I enjoyed them. But it was becoming one of those... It was one of those tasks that you do regularly enough, and every time you do it, it was just slightly inconvenient. Like, this blender is not doing its job, and you just grumble about it. And so it was just this progressively mounting, like, just... I'm sick and fed up with this blender.
I'm lost on our roadmap. How did we get off on the blender tangent?
No, we're talking... Because you were talking about spending your paycheck
on childhood trauma of having a crappy blender.
Yeah.
Okay.
You had this remarkable epiphany about this emotional scarring that you had deep from your past, and that was the first thing that you bought with your paycheck. And the first thing I bought with the paycheck was a blender because I was mad at it.
Okay.
You just have such more emotional depth to you as a person, Ben.
So maybe you haven't reached the point yet, because it did take me a decade to figure this out. What your emotional attachment was? No, 3 decades. Jeez. what your emotional attachment to the playmat is. What is it about that playmat that gave you that infatuation?
So I don't know what it is. I think it's got to be the art, and I'm going to try to describe it. Link in the show notes. Is that a thing that you can do?
Yeah, link in the show notes.
So yeah, to the art if we can find it.
Sure, of the playmat.
So first of all, it's very well done. It's in an anime style. So if you've never seen anime style,
right, and that's already something that ticks a box for you.
Sharp lines, somewhat emphasizing different aspects of like, I can't even describe it very well. It's an anime style. I like comic books. I like anime. I like that art style in general in the first place. Second, it is of a character that I enjoy. Like the lore of this character is good. It's a strong, independent woman. The art is done in a way that it spirals and it draws your eye straight to the center.
Yeah, you're right.
And the dead center of the art is the woman's face, and she has a very intense look and a very she's lazy, very focused on whatever it is that she's doing. She's casting some magical spell.
Look at this from the link in the show notes, dear listener. But imagine a woman with fire coming out of her hands and spiraling around her. Her hair is fiery. Her arms are fiery. Her eyes are fiery.
And just the look on her face is very intense. And I don't know, maybe it has something to do with I'm attracted to very self-actualized, powerful women. Maybe that has something to do with it, and the fact that it's in this art style that already appeals to me.
It's also a really nice color palette.
It is a very
shades of red and orange and yellow with some deep blues and purples.
Yes, it is contrasted with deep blues and purples in the background, which makes it is a very well done piece of art.
If you took your glasses off and stared at it from a distance, you might think it was and held it upside down, it would look like a beautiful sunset.
And at the center of this beautiful sunset is a strong, self-actualized, independent woman. And that kind of a person I am very attracted to. My wife is a very independent, self-actualized woman.
She is. She's amazing. So we have now this idea of things that you're infatuated with and why you're infatuated. Maybe you don't know.
You know what it is? I think it's not so simple to explain why. I think it's more of their switches. Everybody's got a handful of switches in their brain, and this thing appeals to me and it flips these 4 switches. This thing appeals to me and it flips these 5 switches.
And apparently this playmat flipped enough of them that you couldn't move on.
I think it flipped a critical mass of switches. I love the artwork, the color palette is fantastic. This is a thing that I appreciate, and it is functional.
Within your price range.
It is in my price. It is easily
portable
attainable.
That you can take with you back in your suitcase on the airplane.
There are so many upsides to owning this thing that I couldn't. My brain.
The
downsides
just weren't that many.
Yeah.
My wife might be mad at me for spending $20 on this.
The little guy in my brain that's flipping, looking at the control board, and we flipped 90% of these switches. How can we walk away from this?
Can you not see the panel is lit up?
Yeah, alright, so another tangent. I always imagine my brain as working like the Starship Enterprise command center.
Yeah, like the movie British. Inside Out.
Like the
Pixar movie.
Yeah, exactly like that. Except in mine, there's more people, and it's they're wearing Starfleet uniforms.
Okay, alright. I got that.
But I can see the captain up there is alright, we need to move on. And then some engineer in the back no, we can't.
It's
Captain,
Joy.
She's
like, stop everything.
We can't. No, it's not going to work. For some reason, Captain, propulsion's down. I don't know what's happening. and then that was the brain cycles, right? Because the
I'm like, Josh, come on, let's go, man. You don't need this playmat. You're like, I can't move.
Yeah, that's what happened. Because the conversation between the crew in my brain was becoming more and more animated until the captain finally, all right, that's it, stop. We're going to solve this problem right now. Just buy the thing and then we can move on.
And the sales lady behind the counter is watching you, and she knows you're a goner.
She knew. She knew.
She's like, you want me to put a gift ribbon on it?
She saw me staring at it, and then saw you try to pull me away, and immediately went off to other customers this guy's done.
No, I don't even need to totally try to sell him one.
Yep.
That's awesome. So I was thinking of other things I was infatuated with, and I remember when I was 6 years old and I started kindergarten, and I had my first crush. This little girl named Courtney. I think we were in class together, and I saw her occasionally there.
You were 6?
I was 6 or 7.
Okay, go ahead.
And I remember one day, we lived near each other. Maybe it was a half mile, but it was kind of down a country lane. And to 6-year-old, walking a half mile just feels like...
This is never going to end.
A marathon.
This is how I will die. And I will die walking home.
I remember some reason, I don't know why, I got approval of my mom to go over to her house. And I just wanted to go over there because I was infatuated with her in a way only a 6-year-old can be. it wasn't sexual or anything like that. It was just
Man, we'd hope not.
starting to wake up this idea in my brain that I, as a human male, was attracted to human females, but didn't yet understand it. So I got my mom's approval, and I went over there and knocked on the door in the cute little 6-year-old way, like, can Courtney come out and play? And like, oh, she's sleeping, but you can come in, Ben. I was like, okay. So they let me in the house.
What time was it that Courtney was sleeping?
And it was like 3 o'clock on a Saturday, and she fell asleep on the couch. This is kind of hazy.
Okay.
6 years old.
Got it. Okay.
And so they let me in the house, and I went in, and she was asleep on the couch. And it was everything as magical as Prince Charming and Sleeping Beauty.
Oh, are you Prince Charming in this scenario?
Yeah. So she's laying there on the couch, and she has the most glorious, beautiful, like naturally curly hair. Just
Oh, fail.
Oh.
Cell phones.
It was a spam call too.
My phone has been on silent for the last 3 years.
Oh man, I should have put it on silent. Let me do that now.
While Ben is away, I want to let's maybe reiterate for everybody in the room that we are talking about a 6-year-old. So let's bring it down a notch.
Okay, sorry.
Glorious golden hair. She's 6.
Well,
bring it back.
Glorious golden hair. She's a little bit sweaty because it's a hot afternoon. We live in Idaho, and it's not. You're the one sexualizing this.
Am I?
And I think her mom says, Courtney, Ben's here. And she kind of sits up and she stretches and blinks and kind of pushes her hair out of her face. And it was the same moment as seeing those Nike Air Max shoes for the first time. Like, there was a light shining from behind her and a choir of angels singing. And I was so starstruck, I don't think I even knew what to say. And I don't even remember if we played together, and I don't have any contact with her before or since.
Oh, you ruined it. I was going to jump in and be like, just so everyone's aware, Ben's wife's name is Alicia,
not Courtney.
Not Courtney.
So
something happened.
But I still have these memories. I don't have many memories from when I'm 6, but I have that one. And it was the same kind of thing. In the control room of my brain, a lot of switches went on all at once, even though I was 6 years old. Mm-hmm. She was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. And I was just awestruck. And I didn't know what to do next. I couldn't even talk to her. It was like, also in like Inside Out. Girl. Oh my gosh, what do we do? Everyone crashing into each other in the control room. Yeah.
The other thing I wanted you to say was, like, she woke up, stretched, and blinked her eyes, looked at me and said, who are you?
Maybe she said that.
No idea who you were ever.
Yeah.
Is that the last memory you have of Courtney?
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
So it must have gone really downhill from there.
We were 6. We were 6. It wasn't like we planned out our futures together. We were just like, want to play blocks. So
I actually dated a Courtney in high school. So there's a parallel universe somewhere where this is the same Courtney.
So I think the underlying theme I wanted to explore here was the idea of being infatuated with something. Why does it happen? What creates the intensity of it when it does? How do you react to it? So
that we can actually talk about games in general for that, because that's
okay. So let's go full circle. We came here to play Magic the Gathering.
Yes.
You and I met once in the Air Force, which we'll talk about some other time. But I remember one time when I was starting to realize that you were somebody I wanted to be friends with. And I knew that you went somewhere on like certain nights of the week. And I'm like, so what is that thing that you do when you go somewhere on like Wednesdays or Fridays? And you're like, listen, I don't know if you decided, because there's kind of this stigma against geek stuff, and it's gotten less since then. But back in 2005, you were like, listen, I go to a comic book store and play a game called Magic the Gathering. Now, I don't remember if you said to me, would you like to come and try it out? Or if I said, hey, do you think I could come and try it out? Which do you think it was?
I think it was probably you volunteering, because that's something that you would do. If you find some new experience that you've not been a part of or have never seen before, you're there. You spent 3 years in England, and having never seen a game of rugby, decided you were going to buy season tickets to Bath. I don't know what the Bath rugby team is.
Nailed it.
Okay. So you do things like that. You were driving through some random town in the south somewhere. You stopped for lunch, and everybody was like not in the town. Like, where you asked somebody, where's everybody? Oh, they're at the college football game, and you went to the college football game. This is a thing that you would do. You would hear about me sneaking off to go do nerdy, geeky things that I was kind of embarrassed by, and as a way of making me feel better about it, you wanted to include yourself and be like, oh, well, can you show me this thing?
So I showed up and went with you to the comic book store, of which I'm wearing their T-shirt right now.
I did not even notice that.
Yeah.
Holy cow. That's them. Unbelievable.
So, I went with you to the store, and it was the same kind of infatuation experience.
With you?
It lit up a lot of the lights in the panel. I'm like, oh, they're playing this game. And it requires a bit of knowledge, and it's kind of short in its interaction, and it's structured, and it has a beginning and an end, and it rewards creativity and knowledge of the format, and you can get better over time, and you can have victory, and if you're victorious, you get prizes and glory and
nerd glory,
but glory nonetheless.
Nerd glory is the best glory, Ben.
Well, you know, there's that notorious incident that went viral on the internet where one of the best Magic players of all time, John Finkel, was kind of like outed as a nerd when he went on a date with a woman and he told her he was Magic World Champion, and then she went and wrote a blog post about him saying that she couldn't date a guy like that, and then she got shamed on the internet for... She
got shamed on the internet.
Yeah.
And also, John Finkel probably made a ton of money on the Pro Tour at that time.
So I have another story about John Finkel. I have to tell you another time. I'll put that in the notes. But I had the same infatuation thing when I saw what Magic the Gathering could do for me. I was like, I need a hobby. You know, I don't have a car I'm building in the garage. I don't have a bicycle that I tinker with on the weekends. I needed something as an outlet for my competitive nature, for my creative nature, for my a little bit of something to waste some money on, and something I can organize and futz around with.
Yeah. Something that occupies your brain when you're not doing anything.
And Magic the Gathering ticked all those boxes, and I was in, and have been ever since. You know, you found other things to scratch the itch from time to time.
Well, and that's the thing.
I've always stayed with it,
and I keep coming back to it because it is the best
of those kinds of things.
Excuse me, it is the best. Can we edit that out? My voice cracking.
No.
God. I sound like a super... All right, dear listener, I spent last night, yelling. We were in a very loud place for dinner, and we had to yell at each other, and I'm very hoarse. I apologize. Inaugural episode. Yeah. Best ever.
Okay.
No, but, not just Magic, but you're right. I've moved on to different things, and I come back, and I do these things for a while. And it's less about Magic Gathering specifically for me, and more about, like you were talking about, a creative outlet. I love to problem solve. And so these games, like board games, role-playing games, whatever, it gives me this space. Here is the space, here is the problem, and here is an infinite number of ways that you can solve this problem. Which then appeals to the creativity side of me, because like, here's all the ways that other people have solved this problem. Well, I deliberately ignore those. I'm going to find some weird circuitous route to solve this problem.
Which sometimes bring you glory and sometimes brings you ruin.
It does. I am way more... I fail at it a lot more than I succeed. But the times that I succeed, like, people's jaw drops. Like, how is that even possible? And that's where I really get
Makes it worth it.
Makes it worth it, yeah.
So I want to tell a little story about something that just happened in this tournament to Josh and me. So we're in the 4th round of the main competitive event where the top prize is $8,000 cash. So it's pretty high stakes. And Josh comes over and is watching me play, and I'm a bit nervous, as I always get in these things. I usually manage to channel my nervous energy into competitive execution, and for the most part have found, moderate success. But sometimes it just, my nervous energy comes into foolish mistakes. And Josh has come up behind me and is observing, and I make one of those foolish mistakes and just do something dumb. And it's so dumb he can't contain himself and speaks out loud, which violates several rules of decorum and culture.
Well, and you can think, like this is completely abstract it doesn't have to be this tournament. Like, you can think of any competitive thing where then a third party interferes and alters the outcome of the thing. That's a problem.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, enter my opponent. There is an entire spectrum of people that you play against when you're playing Magic the Gathering. Everywhere from, old dads that do this as a hobby, like they're tinkering with a car in the garage, to young guys who are like hardcore gamers who have zeroed in on Magic the Gathering as the premier gaming experience and want to be the best person in the world. And everything in between. Guys who are hardcore and nail you with every rule and are unpleasant to play against, and guys that are just there to have a good time and have it. This kid I was playing against was probably, what would you say, 22 maybe?
Wow, no, probably mid-20s. 22 might be on the young end of it.
Okay, but young kid.
Young kid, 20-something.
And you had your little outburst, and I was like, oh no. Because one, you were right about what you said that I'd screwed up. It was worth an outburst. And two, it caused a big problem. It kind of it was like it was like if Tiger Woods is in the middle of his backswing and someone shouts out before he finishes swinging the club.
No, it was worse than that. It was like if Tiger Woods is like putting for birdie for the win, and someone threw a beer can at him.
Right.
That's how bad. That's how atrocious my interference was.
It was pretty bad. So then it creates this state where in the game where I'm not sure what the next action should be, because my violation of the rules is pretty glaring, and it definitely changes the outcome of the game.
Yes, literally, the game could have hung on this.
Yes. So my opponent decides to call a judge, and I know he should. I don't disagree with that at all. And he raises his hand, and the judge comes over, and there's this moment where we have to decide what we're going to tell the judge about it. Now, I'm imagining myself in my opponent's situation, and one, I would have wanted to have a favorable outcome for myself in the game, and two, I would have wanted vengeance on you, the interferer from the outside, the same as you would if it was the guy that threw the beer can at Tiger Woods.
Yes, absolutely.
You would want him ejected from the tournament and banned for life.
Doesn't matter if I was right. I was right. The situation was wrong, and I did the outburst. But I was wrong in the sense that I was not in a position to point that out.
And I was aware that was a potential outcome. And I knew you could take it gracefully and accept it for what it was. But I also didn't want that outcome to happen because you're my friend, and I didn't want you to get thrown out of the tournament. And as the judge was over, all of this was flying through my mind. I was imagining, you getting thrown out of the tournament and what I was going to do and stuff. And my opponent, to his everlasting credit, presented the situation in a way that completely left you out of the equation.
Yeah, I was never mentioned.
Didn't mention you at all, just talked about the rules violation. That was quickly resolved. The judge left. And I was in awe at this 25-year-old who handled this so gracefully. Really. If I was in his situation, I would not have been able to handle it that gracefully. I would have mentioned you as the interferer instead of just the rules situation that was happening in the game. So
now, it's worth pointing out that I am terrible, because that was the second time that this had happened.
This tournament.
Yes, but the other time was to my credit because I stopped you from losing. So you're okay with it that time.
No. This time it was an optional action that could be missed. The other time my opponent was doing an illegal action that should not have proceeded.
He was unintentionally cheating.
Right. Well, we don't know what his intent was. We can assume it was unintentional. It seemed and felt unintentional.
I think we're nice enough, and we will be gracious enough from on high
to say it was unintentional.
Deem it was unintentional.
Okay.
We'll give him that.
It was unintentional.
You beat him after that, so we'll go ahead and give him that.
So, in the same form, even though I made this egregious error in the game, ultimately my opponent, his deck just failed him, and I vanquished him as time expired in the round.
I love the verb vanquished. Makes it seem like it was such an epic clash.
It did. I mean, it went to the fourth turn of extra turns,
which is very into the minutia of Magic the Gathering, which we were trying to avoid. I'm just saying that what you're saying, it sounds like
it was I beat him on the last possible moment in the game.
Yes. No. All right. So
with an explosive spell.
I'm just trying to point out the juxtaposition of your verbiage and how you perceive the game versus the reality.
Right.
So from Ben's perspective, you were in some arena, flinging it's a pure battle of wits with these cards as tools against your opponent. But from the outside looking in, you were at a card table playing a very civil board game with another person.
But even though I messed up.
Well, no.
I managed to turn it around and win on the last turn of extra turns. Mm-hmm. If there had been one more turn, I wouldn't have won, and it would have gone to a draw. And although he might have beat me on the next attack.
Who knows?
So now we reach this point where after the match, we have the results slip that we have to sign and give to the judge. And there's a judge coming over because we're one of the last matches still going on. He's going to take a results slip away. And I have this moment where I think I could do something that's done commonly in Magic the Gathering and concede the match to my opponent, even though I beat him in the game. Basically, just give it to him for free.
And we had other things to do.
We were going to come and record this podcast.
Right, so we were going to leave the tournament anyway.
But we were in the bracket in the situation where the winner was going to go on and have a good chance to contend for the second day and potentially the championship, and the loser was going to go down in esteem and probably not be able to contend for the championship. So it was pivotal. My opponent was noticeably nervous, but much to his credit, showed good character in a tense moment. And so we had this moment, and I looked at him, and I looked at you, and I thought, I'm going to give this guy the match. And I did. I turned to him and I said, I'm going to let you have it. And I picked up the result slip and wrote down that he was victorious and signed it and handed it to him. And he was, I don't know, he was pretty elated.
He was very gracious about it too.
Yeah.
Very excited, very happy. And honestly, that's, I hope that he feels in karmic-wise that's his reward for
I hope so too.
Maybe not getting me thrown out.
I absolutely do. And I love this as a parent when I see this with my kids. I always want them to make the right choice, but in life, sometimes when you make the right choice, you don't get a reward right away.
Yeah.
And this was pretty close proximity of good choice reward. I wanted him to feel like him doing the stand-up thing and not throwing out my friend from the match. And he said afterwards that he knew you were a good guy and you weren't just trying to screw up the game.
Right.
But that him doing that stand-up thing was rewarded by me giving him the win. And now next round he'll play in the winner's bracket and continue to contend for the tournament. And I hope he does well.
Good. Yeah, good for him.
Yeah, nice kid.
Kid, 25 years old.
All right.
Anybody 2 decades or young?
No. I think this is a worthy tangent to explore because you are approaching it. How old are you now?
I am 35.
35. Okay. You've never called anyone kid?
Oh, I call people kids all the time.
What right now is your minimum age? Above this age, you won't call them a kid.
Oh, interesting. For me, when I call people kid, it's more about their behavior. It's not about their age. It's about how they act or how they present themselves. So, like, there are grown men that I call kids because they act like, they act like children.
Really?
Or they dress like children, or they do something childish. Like, look at this.
You can think of a specific situation where you refer to a grown man as a kid because of that. Like you would say that kid, or
yeah, I would. Yeah. Cutting in line. You try to cut somebody in line. Like, look at this kid. What is this?
Okay.
And all right, that's something we should explore. Put that down on the notes for another episode, because I have a theory that what separates
about cutting in line,
human civilization,
we'll put cutting in line in the notes,
from the chaos of the universe is that human beings will stand in a line and wait their turn.
Oh yeah. Oh, okay. You and I've talked about cutting in line before, and I know that's a whole topic that deserves more.
Yeah,
let's not go there now.
I'm very passionate about line cutting.
Okay. So, but what age you will call people kid? To me, someone that's still in college or just got out of college, I think of and use the word kid to describe that person.
Well, right now, but it's a sliding window. As you get older, the people that you will call kid will only increase. It's like, yes, we're gonna be recording our 900th episode 10 years from now, and you're gonna say the same thing, like, oh well, anybody that's
less than 30
that only has like 2 kids that are under the age of 3, that they're a kid.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but yes, you're right. It's a sliding window. So for me, as a 42 playing against this guy across the table, my avatar identification, if I were to just zoom out of my body and look down on the situation and say, there is a 42-year-old man playing a 25-year-old kid, I would say man and kid. I'm 20 years older than him. It's almost twice his life.
Yeah, yes, this is true. So presumably you have much more experience. But it doesn't change the fact that we're talking about nomenclature.
But it also doesn't change the fact that I, as a 42-year-old man, can admire the character of a 25-year-old kid who can handle a complex social situation like that with grace and class.
Here's an interesting question. Would you have called him kid to his face? Like, after that was all said and done, would you say, like, you're a good kid? Would you have said that to him?
No, and that has a separate threshold.
Actually identifying somebody as a kid.
Yes, to their face.
To their face.
But so the group of people I would refer to as kid when talking to you to refer to someone else is much older than the group of people when I was talking to them to their face I would call them kid.
Unless you're deliberately trying to insult them. Listen, kid.
I don't generally do that.
You're not an insulting person.
I'm not going to try to insult someone.
Yeah, this is knowledge from outside of the realm of what we're trying to discuss. But for you, dear listener, Benjamin Rich, I assert, is one of the best human beings on the planet. Nicest guy. Super open to everything. I don't know when he sleeps because he's out doing good all the time.
I don't know about all that, but I definitely don't try to generally don't deliberately try to insult people to their face. But there's something I admire about the directness with which you engage with people that doesn't put those kinds of things outside the realm of possibility, because there are definitely situations in life where I'm frustrated with people or angry with people or upset with people, but I've generally found as a policy that if I just tried to take the proverbial high road, that things work out better.
I like how you paint being a blunt jerk as such a nice picture, as like a character, like as a good piece, a good thing.
So there's this concept in the field of psychology where they have personality. I think there's the 5 core personality metrics or something like that, and each one is a spectrum, and it's not necessarily good or bad. It's just one or the other. And one in which I think you and I are both kind of high on is the idea of disagreeableness. You could have somebody that's highly disagreeable or not disagreeable. Okay. And that aspect of their personality is kind of an individual slider, independent from the others. Someone who's not at all disagreeable is like the kind of person, if you say, where do you want to go out for eat, they don't know, and they won't disagree with you no matter what you pick. They'll just go along with anything.
Okay.
And somebody that's highly disagreeable has a very opinionated thing and will argue for it. And there's times in life when you need either kind of person.
Right.
Sometimes you need the disagreeable person. Sometimes the whole team is going the wrong way and you need someone that's going to stand up aside from everyone and say, wait a minute, we're doing the wrong thing. And sometimes you just need an agreeable person to go along with things.
Yes.
So what you were talking about, why I described your aspect of being, what did you say, confrontational jerk?
Yeah.
Sometimes you need a confrontational jerk. I remember one time when you and I were a decade and a half younger, and there was a person that needed to be told off, and you told them off, and I wasn't capable of doing it.
When was this?
Do you want me to say their name?
Do we need to say their name?
I
know what you're talking about.
Okay.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
He did need telling off.
Right. But I wasn't capable of doing it.
I feel bad for him. I felt bad for him at the time.
Here's the thing. Here's how you and I were a team in that situation. You might not know this because I never told you the rest of the story.
You did tell me the story, but go ahead.
Okay. You told him off.
Yes.
And he needed it. And about a week later, he came to me in private, in tears, distressed, not just about you, but after you did that, him having the realization why he needed to be told off. And I think it helped him in a positive way. So you were able to give him the reality check, and I was able to comfort him and help shore him back up after he got brought down.
Between the two of us, we make an excellent one counselor. No, that's a Parks and Rec joke. Where you ever watch that show? You don't watch that show.
No.
You said that.
I'm aware of it.
There's a season where they have 2 characters, one of them being Rob Lowe, and he's super positive, just ultra positive all the time. So positive that he can't do his job as an auditor. And so they paired him with a guy who is just so blunt and in the numbers that he has zero care about what other people feel or think. So they paired them together because separately they couldn't get anything done. Like the super upbeat character would never be able to fire people or make changes that would negatively impact. And then the auditor guy, the quote was, "I would just get death threats." And so,
right.
And so, but together they were a great team, and they talked about it. And Rob Lowe put his hand "You're all so amazing," and the other guy took his hand and pulled it down "You're all fired."
Yes.
So between the two of us, we could probably make an excellent team fixing people's lives. There it is. We're pitching. Forget the podcast. We need a reality show on TLC.
All right.
We have
bad cop, good cop.
Yeah, good, yeah. We'll have to come up with a better name for it. You wear white shirts, I'll wear black shirts, and I'll come in and yell at people, and then you'll come I'll break them into tiny pieces, and then you'll come in behind me and put the pieces back together in a better version of themselves.
Everything's gonna be okay, and you're better off having had this experience.
And then at the end of the show, we'll have that cathartic moment where you were right, I needed that, or I'll get shot in the face. One of those.
Sometimes people hate that person. Did you see the movie Whiplash with the actor that plays J. Jonah Jameson?
We don't know his name, but he plays J. Jonah Jameson, and everybody knows who that is.
Oh,
it doesn't matter. No. I know what you're talking about.
Okay.
But I have not seen that movie.
Anyway, the central idea of the movie is that there's this maniacal, power-mad jazz director at this high-powered music school.
I have seen one clip from that where he is yelling at a drummer and he throws a chair at him.
He has a theory that he wants to make the world's best musician, but it's not possible to make the world's best musician without putting them through a pressure cooker, an epic pressure cooker. So he kind of seeks out someone he thinks is a potential and then just destroys them until they either fail and he was right that they didn't deserve the chance in the first place, or they prove themselves up to the challenge and become the best ever.
So,
like Mr. Glass in Unbreakable.
Right.
He's crashing trains to try to see who the person that lives is.
Yes, this is not my destiny, but it's my destiny to find that one.
Right.
Yeah. I never understood those people. You're actively you're deciding to take a back seat to somebody else's
But there's
glory.
all kinds of people in the world. There's your coaches and your, that they're, or I always think about like writers or, the people, they don't tell this, like songwriters. You got famous people like, Taylor Swift and Avril Lavigne that probably aren't very good at writing songs themselves. Other people that are talented musicians write music.
You are going to get some comments talking bad about Avril Lavigne.
And they sing it. I love Avril Lavigne. I'm going to her concert next month.
Yeah, but you're going to get hate for saying that they're probably not very good at writing songs. Ben Rich said that Avril Lavigne can't write songs.
I read this story about
right
her, about how she had one of her songs. It was one of her biggest hits. And she kind of went out in public and like, oh, this is a great song. She's like, yeah, I worked so hard on it. And then I heard the story that the person that actually wrote it was like, yeah, she changed one word. Oh, I worked so hard on that song.
That's like playing to your strengths, right? If you have an inclination towards music, but you're not a good musician, that doesn't mean there's nothing for you to do in the music industry.
Yeah.
And then the other part of that, and you're talking about coaches and things, like that's separate from what I was talking about, I think. The stepping back to find the destined one.
The person who knows they'll never be the greatest, but they can be the mentor to discover and train the greatest.
Right, that's a different thing than just like a coach. Or like
what about like Tiger Woods' dad, He wasn't going to be the greatest golfer, but he was going to make his son be the greatest golfer.
That's a whole nother thing. Like, obviously, I don't know the details of their relationship.
I read a book about him.
Oh, well, of course. So you know way more about it than I do. My initial gut reaction is the vicarious living thing that parents are prone to do. Like, you want your kid to go do the thing that you never could do because...
Also, like Venus and Serena Williams' dad. These are people who are very deliberately start out with very young children and the grand vision that they were going to turn their child into a world-class professional athlete.
What's interesting, though, is that the number of people that do this is much larger than the people that are successful at it.
Yeah, when we make shows about them, too. Like, what's that show about the women who make their daughters into beauty pageant contestants?
The Dance Moms. Or, no, not Dance Moms, but I know what you're talking about. And Dance Moms is another one.
Yeah.
Yeah, shows about the people pushing their kids to do things, and it is a judgment call whether or not that's good for the kids.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And people, I mean, Tiger Woods' life hasn't been his beautiful, storybook ending.
But he was very successful for a time, and he's made choices. That's fine. He can make choices that he wants. It's a free country. Get arrested if you break the law, but otherwise, just you be you. But for every Tiger Woods whose dad raised him up and was successful,
there's some maniacal, overly competitive sports coach parent, helicopter parent.
Oh, not one, but like 100.
Right. Okay. I wonder what the actual ratio is. How many failed helicopter parents out there are there with broken children who hate their parents and didn't ultimately succeed at the thing?
I don't know about broken children. That might be going a little far. But stuff like my sister was very, very skilled at softball when she was in middle school and early in high school. And my dad was helping her with that. And he got way too involved with it and was pushing her, and they were practicing too much. And it degraded their relationship to the point where she didn't like softball anymore.
Daddy, I hate you.
There's a whole story about that. That was an epic day, and it was awesome and terrible, but we're not going to go there. But that's what I'm talking about. That one wasn't a catastrophic failure, but it turned my sister off to softball, and she never did it again. And so how many kids that could have been great were pushed too hard and then get turned off of the thing that they would be great at?
I feel like my wife and I are not enough. I mean, sometimes when people ask me, what are your kids going to do when they grow up? I'm like, I don't know, we never really talked about that. I'm sure they'll think of something.
My kids say stuff like that all the time. What do I do when I grow up? And I said, well, what do you like doing? I like building things. I'm going to be a builder. And I said, and I just subtly and very carefully correct them, you'll be an engineer. He goes, why, what's the difference? And I go, builder is the guy that's on the work site putting up scaffolding. An engineer is the guy telling him what to put up.
So that takes me back to a thought I had a minute ago, and you led into it brilliantly. And that is, I remember as a kid, you kind of had this idea, and I don't think it's a problem idea, it's that your lack of depth and richness of your understanding of things, that there's only 5 jobs you can have when you grow up. You can be a doctor, you can be a lawyer, you can be a firefighter, you can be a policeman, or you can be an astronaut. So pick one and go get them, kid. Or a professional athlete, but you can't, so someone else is going to do that.
Right.
And then, now that I'm grown up, I can't even describe my own job. Like, there's so much nuance to it. Like, we were talking a minute ago about performance and, like, producing creative things. You know, there's the performer, there's the cinematographer, there's the Foley, there's, you know, there's infinite jobs surrounding the creation of something that you didn't know existed when you were a kid and you were trying to figure out what to do. And if you pick any one of those people and ask them to trace the trail backwards to how they ended up in that end spot, they might not be able to tell you.
They probably wouldn't be able to tell you. I'm 35 years old. I have changed entirely my careers 4 times now, and I'm to the point where, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Like that you get that in the job interviews, and I get that question. I go, I don't know, and that's a good thing. Like the next 5 years, like, can change so radically that all I know is I'm going to land on my feet.
Let me ask you that same question in a different way.
Okay.
What do you imagine that someday you might end up somewhere and feel like you've achieved full actualization? Like, not where do you see yourself in 5 years, like, you know now where you need to be and you're going to get there, but do you think someday you'll end up somewhere and look back on it and say, I finally got here?
So that presumes that you can actualize, that you can feel like you've achieved and gone to the top of the mountain or whatever. That's one of the biggest things that's changed in my life in the last, I'd say, decade, and why I'm such a calmer person now than I was a decade ago when we first met. Because I've realized that I'm not going to get that from an external source. There is nothing out in the world that's going to make me feel like I've achieved and done. Like, it's going to have to come from within.
Okay, but it doesn't have to be an external source, and for you to have done that.
Well, and this is why I was so angry when I was
guru on top of a mountain.
Well, I like achieving. I've always been a high achieving. Like, in school, I got awards and I got straight A's, and I was the captain of the teams because I tried my hardest. I wasn't always the best, but I tried hard and I listened, and so the coaches liked me and they made me a captain. And blah blah blah.
So if Ben and Josh now could go back in time to Josh at that time and talk to him, would you feel like he was successful?
No, Josh now would have to smack around Josh then to get him to listen at all, and he wouldn't, because he'd be like, whatever, old man, you don't know what you're talking about. I'm literally you, I know what I'm talking about, but no, it wouldn't work. So those hyperbolic scenarios I don't like. But what I'm describing is that I think I was a very angry person when I was younger because I wanted to achieve in whatever role that I was put in at the time. And if that conflicted with anybody else's perception of achievement, then that caused just friction and conflict.
Very interesting.
And it was like, it would make me angry, it would make them angry, and I wasn't successful in those places.
That sounds like the kind of thing that could lead you to attend the Air Force Academy.
Oh, God. What I'm driving at is that I've realized that it doesn't matter what I do. It doesn't matter how high I achieve in those things, so long as I am fulfilling my roles and responsibilities as a parent, as a husband, and as just like a law-abiding citizen of society, really.
Okay, so here's the weird thing about this, is sometimes you live or you're close enough to someone that you get to see this happen in their life, and you realize that maybe telling yourself that it doesn't exist is wrong. So my wife and Alicia and I have been married for 20 years now, and ever since we got our first year of marriage, we started having kids, and almost immediately she and I made the very deliberate decision that she would stay home and raise our children. And all of the things we made in life, the sacrifices that we made, the choices we made surrounding that, all fed into that commitment that we had together to her being a stay-at-home mother to help raise our children. No judgment on anyone else and what their situation is and their decisions are. That's the decision we made.
My wife does not stay home with our children, and she's constantly mad at the women that stay home with their children because they have birthday parties at like 3 o'clock on a Tuesday.
Well,
who's got time for this?
Alicia doesn't do that either. But that aside, that was a decision we made together. But from the very beginning, she said to me, someday I would like to be an American Sign Language interpreter.
How long ago did she say that?
From the very first time I remember.
Wow. That's a wow.
Yes.
Because we flash forward now, 19 years later.
Just last month, she passed her BEI national certification for becoming an officially licensed American Sign Language interpreter. Now, if I could say that during those intervening 20 years, she had constantly studied and stayed up on it and prepared on it, I'd have thought it was this, master plan she was executing. But it wasn't. It was just a dream that lived in the back of her head. And now, having gone through 2 years of curriculum and practice and weekly interpretation at church and that kind of stuff, I thought maybe the dream would have died down in fire and intensity, and she would be like, oh yeah, I finally came around to this, and it's hard work, and it wasn't as romantic as I thought. She is as excited about it now as she ever was. And it's like, I'm finally doing it. And she just loves it. She always wanted to do it. She finally did it, and she loves it. And I'm so envious of that. In those intervening 20 years, I've had 10 jobs, and I haven't loved any of them. And I have to go trudge off to work every day,
right,
and do my job. And I don't always hate, but I never feel like this is the thing I was meant to do, and I've been working towards it, and here I am.
You're not burning with passion every time you go and generate those PowerPoint slides.
Yes, I get the stuff I'm supposed to be the most passionate about. I just find kind of dull sometimes, and I have trouble engaging with it. And then how do I and I recognize this about myself, and I feel like it's a disservice to me and the work that I'm doing when I can't just be passionate about it. Like, oh my gosh, what do I do about the Chinese, and then cyber, and figure it all out and come up with something brilliant and turn it into a program and get everyone involved and solve the world's problems. I just kind of recognize that I can't affect any of that, and I don't really care.
Well, yeah, individual agency is just so low. These problems are so big. Yeah, that's a whole other discussion point in and of itself.
But I ended up down that tangent because I was thinking about the idea of actualizing.
Your wife finally actualized her dream from 20 years ago, and honestly, while you're telling that story, I'm envious that she had such a clear vision of what she wanted, and she achieved it, and is still passionate about it.
And it kind of astonished me because I was with her for those 20 years. I know that she wasn't studying it.
So the scary part about the story that I want to ask you now is what's next? Because that's the problem with achieving achievable dreams is, I'm here, I did it. Now what?
Yeah, I heard this told once in a talk that I really loved. It's like the dog who furiously digs a hole under the fence and then sits down on the other side.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So now, as our kids are older and all in school, there will be, probably for the first time in 20 years, a second income in our family. And to me, the part I'm excited about is the possibilities that means. Does that mean we can actually start saving up some money for a down payment on a house we'd really like to live in, or go on a nice vacation once a year, or anything along those kinds of lines? But for her, she's a bit nervous about the transition from student to professional. What does it mean? Will I have to commute far? Will I be good at it? And there's some legitimate nervousness about this. I mean, imagine that you're interpreting in a high stakes courtroom drama or something like that.
I would advise not doing that for her first job.
You can't. First of all, you can't. She has a basic level certification. There's an advanced level certification that's required before you can do this. You need some years of experience under your belt.
You need to play in the kids' room before you get to sit at the adults' table.
But imagine instead she takes a job where she's at a call center where someone who's deaf calls in with a video phone, and she has to interpret to a hearing person. So the deaf person signing to her, she's interpreting what they say, and she's talking to the hearing person. Now imagine, knowing what you know about my wife, imagine those two people get in a fight. And the signing person signs angrily and swears. She has an ethical obligation to angrily swear. My wife probably hasn't angrily swore in 30 years.
Well, it also comes back to who's employing her. As a part of the conversation, if you're talking about this scenario where she's at a call center, presumably it's the call center that's paying for her services. Or maybe a third party, the call center is paying a contractor to have services interpreted, whatever.
But there's also the interpreter's code. You are a conduit of communication.
I get that, but
you have an ethical obligation to accurately relay the
exact words, or
yes,
just the meaning.
The meaning.
The meaning. So at the same time, she will probably have an onus to help de-escalate the situation.
No, that's unethical.
Really?
Yes.
Oh. Okay, well then never mind. Then she needs to angrily turn and start swearing at this person.
Right.
In those tones. The proper tones that, I don't know how you intonate.
It's along the same lines of a defense attorney vigorously defending a client they know to be guilty.
Right, okay.
It's necessary from an ethical point of view to accurately convey the meaning intended by the person who's saying it.
This is a very, 1% of the time this might happen.
Sure.
But it is an excellent fringe case to bring up because these are the moral quandaries that you should have before you become
I'll put this
vested.
on our list of things because we've had some very interesting discussions about the moral quandaries of being a language interpreter.
Oh, stay riveted, dear listeners. That sounds like an amazing discussion.
Okay, so I want to transition to just a couple of things we might talk about in the future.
Okay.
Just types of things, like corners, like Gray and Brady have.
Oh, we can't just copy everything.
We're not.
So here's my intention.
But there's going to be themes, like you're the star of your own life.
Yeah. Yeah. Ben laid this out when we first got here. I didn't lay anything out, but I'm going to lay it out now. There's an expectation where we like this format, the two guys talking format, but we can't just lift everything from the podcasts that we like. That just seems cheap. We've got to be we got to do our own stuff.
Sure.
We have to have our own shtick.
Sure.
We can use it as a starting point and for inspiration as a leaping point.
But I also think these templates are universal. They're not owned by someone.
I know they're not.
I was going to mention.
I don't want to be a knockoff. I don't want to be an unlicensed knockoff Hello Internet podcast.
Sure. But I do like, and maybe they only do it because they have a sponsorship from Audible, but I do like the book review format because you and I spend a lot of time talking about books.
We do that.
So I want to propose a book. It's a nonfiction.
You're making me read a book?
My apologies. How about we make a deal?
Oh, a deal.
How about it's just a straight up swap? If I make you read a book, then I'll read whatever book you want to read. And I promise it won't be the Book of Mormon.
Ooh, I'm glad you put that fine print in there. I agree to these terms.
But I'm okay.
And I will torture you with it.
Okay. I've got one in mind. I'll send it to you offline. You can take a look at it and let me know what you think your pace is, because I don't know what now that you're not cleaning pools anymore. I don't know how much time you're able to dedicate to this time.
About 2 hours a day.
Yeah. All right. Right now, I currently I have an Audible subscription. I listen to a book on my commute and enjoy it. And I'm very eclectic in what I do. I've tried a little bit of classics, some fiction, but mostly I prefer nonfiction. And the book I want to do is nonfiction.
You're a very nonfiction guy.
I'll tell you why. And I think we can discuss this more later. My wife and I have this argument all the time because she was an English major and loves English literature but prefers fiction. And I mostly detest it.
Detest fiction?
Yes.
Or English literature?
Yes.
Both.
Fiction.
Wow. Okay.
Fiction. Mostly.
That makes me sad.
Because, you know the old maxim, truth is stranger than fiction?
Yeah.
I think that's the reason I prefer nonfiction, is it's richer in detail and ideas than fiction, where it's just kind of constrained to what one person can think of.
So I think I prefer fiction personally, and I think that's from a very deep-setted thing in my brain where reality has never quite lived up to my expectations as I was a kid. But that's because, and that's not reality's fault. That's my fault. That's me reading comic books about superheroes and realizing that the real world is just kind of boring.
I saw an internet meme this week where based on the amount of emphasis they gave to learning how to stop, drop, and roll as a kid, I thought being on fire was going to be much more of a problem.
You know what? That's an interesting point. My kids do fire drills all the time,
right?
But that building is made of concrete and steel. It's never going to burn down.
And if it does, you can calmly walk out.
Yeah, exactly. That's funny.
Yeah. All right, so we can do a book review. We can talk about current events or go off on tangents like we are now.
We probably should steer away from current events because we probably have very polarizing ideas.
But yet somehow we still manage to talk about it
what I'm saying is you and I can have a civil conversation.
Civil
but
terms.
our silent listener would just have to sit and suffer through our what can be biased and eclectic viewpoints on things.
Okay. I know you might balk at this, but I also want to include religion among our possible topics because I found our discussions on that to be very enlightening.
So long as we are not evangelicalizing, I'm okay with that. Like if we're talking about, like not this, let's pick apart this religion. No, if we're talking about religion as a concept, then yeah, sure.
Right, and how it influences our lives and our families. And
because it absolutely does. Yeah, okay. I get that.
All right, well, it feels like we're winding down, and we got some Magic playing to do this evening, and probably going to get hungry at some point.
It's not all out of my system yet. I want to play more cards. I want them in my hands. I want to crush my opponents.
You have to finish your purge, your annual purge, like the movie. Where one day a year, you just geek out until you want to puke, and then you're like, okay, I'm good now.
I am very thankful to my gracious wife who lets me go on these trips, and I think she knows it's good for her too. That if I can purge it all out of my system occasionally, it will keep the budget down for the stuff that I want to purchase.
I saw this beautiful chart. If I can find it, I'll put it in the show notes. That talked about bowling, and sometimes I feel like things I do in my life are like that. It showed a graph of like 2 or 3 games of bowling, where on one axis is how much fun you're having, and the other axis is how long the games go on. Mm-hmm. And at the very beginning, you're like, "Yay, this is great! Why don't I do this more often?" And by the end, you're like, "Oh, this is terrible. I hate this." And if you play, you haven't gone bowling in a while, and you do like 2 or 3 frames in a row, by the time you get to the end of the third frame, you're like, oh yeah, this is why I don't do this more often.
You say that like bowling is a bad thing. My family and I consistently bowl probably every other month. The whole family, my 2 little kids too, and we enjoy it.
So perhaps that was a bad example for you. But also bowling has never gone wide, and there's a reason for that. And it's because there's other people like me out there that by the time I get halfway through the second frame, you don't even want to finish it.
Which is hilarious how opposite we are on bowling, because my wife and I own our own bowling balls, own our own bowling shoes, and we're part of a bowling league back when we were first met.
Okay, I am thrilled by the fact that I stumbled into this area of knowledge I did not have about you. That I just picked out of thin air the idea of bowling, and you own your own bowling shoes.
How do you not own your own bowling shoes? Come on. My feet haven't changed size in decades. There is no reason I should be renting shoes every time I go bowling.
Okay, the fact that I rent bowling shoes probably should gross me out, but I just accept that the same way I accept, like, grabbing a hold of the door handle at a public restroom.
We bowled a lot, and it just got to the point where it made more sense economically to own our own stuff. And we did, and we do, and it's awesome. And bowling balls never expire. Like, you're never going to go in the garage and be like, oh, this bowling ball's too old, it won't work anymore.
Yeah, you got a great point there. Like my old golf clubs I inherited from my father-in-law, that I get them out and I'm like, how can I still golf with these? They're terrible.
Are they made of wood?
No, they're not that old, but close. Well, I don't imagine that this will be the last time you and I ever get together for a weekend of gaming and geeking out.
It will absolutely not be. And it will not be the last time that we talk about random things for hours.
All right. I think that's it.